The air inside the Brooklyn Municipal Courthouse carried a strange electricity, heavy with expectation. Wooden benches groaned under the weight of curious spectators, their whispers swirling like static before a storm. At the center of it all sat a boy, who looked out of place. Eli Mercer, 18 years old, in a faded hoodie and jeans. His posture was loose, almost careless, as though he didn't grasp the gravity of the moment. To most watching, he was just another teenager in trouble. To Judge Alistair Keaton, perched high on the bench, he was already guilty. Keaton's smirk said it all. He leaned back in his chair, tapping the case file against polished wood like a man skimming through a magazine. "This shouldn't take long," he said, his voice thick with mockery. A ripple of laughter moved through the gallery. Even the bailiff cracked the faintest grin, but Eli Mercer wasn't laughing. His eyes stayed locked forward, calm and sharp, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. The prosecutor, Amelia Vance, rose to her feet. Young, ambitious, dressed in a navy suit so crisp it looked pressed between glass. She had built her reputation on clean convictions and sharp arguments, and today would be no exception, or so she thought. "Your Honor," she began, her tone rehearsed and confident, "the state will prove beyond question that the defendant unlawfully entered the property of Mr. Leonard Pierce on the evening of August 14th. When officers arrived, Mr. Mercer attempted to flee. His fingerprints were recovered from the garage door and the bicycle inside. The evidence is consistent, undeniable, and paints one clear picture: guilt." She let the words hang in the air, pacing deliberately across the floor. Her heels clicked against marble, each step like a punctuation mark. From the bench, Judge Keaton exhaled heavily, unimpressed. "Sounds straightforward to me. Let's move this along." Spectators nodded, murmuring. The case seemed sealed. At the defense table, Mark Halpern, a weary public defender with tired eyes and an older suit, adjusted his notes. His hands trembled slightly as he prepared to speak, but before he could rise, Eli placed a hand over his papers. Mark froze, confused. Eli stood. His voice was calm, deliberate. "Your Honor, with respect, I'll be representing myself." A stunned silence dropped over the room. Judge Keaton blinked once, then barked out a laugh that echoed against the paneled walls. "You'll what?" "I'll be defending myself," Eli repeated, steady as stone. The gallery erupted. Snickers, whispers, even open laughter. A teenager claiming he could handle his own defense. To them it was absurd. Keaton slammed his gavel for order. "This is a felony trial, not a schoolyard debate. You have no training." Eli tilted his head, his voice even. "I do." The room went still again. His confidence wasn't bravado, it was something else. Something that unsettled even the judge. Keaton scowled, eager to put the boy in his place. "Fine. If you want to embarrass yourself, I'll allow it. But don't expect this court to waste time with theatrics." Eli gave a single nod and reached into his backpack, pulling out a slim folder of papers. For the first time, Amelia Vance's confident smirk faltered. She hadn't expected preparation. He stepped forward, the folder tucked under one arm. He didn't rush. He let the silence build, pulling the room toward him like a tide. "Let's start with the fingerprints," Eli said, his tone precise but casual. "You claim they were found on the bicycle inside Mr. Pierce's garage." Amelia folded her arms. "Correct." "That places you at the scene." Eli shook his head lightly. "Actually, it doesn't. Mr. Pierce's son, Daniel, was my classmate. I rode that bike home with him plenty of times. In fact, I adjusted the gears myself last spring. Of course, my fingerprints are on it. They've been there for months," the gallery murmured. Several jurors exchanged glances. Amelia stiffened, searching her notes. "The fingerprints establish presence." "No," Eli cut in smoothly. "They establish history. Here's a text exchange from Daniel asking me to borrow the bike for a science project. Dated, time-stamped, and verified." He slid a printed copy onto the evidence table. Gasps rippled. The jurors leaned closer. Judge Keaton frowned, irritation flickering in his eyes. "Ms. Vance, is this true?" She hesitated. The fingerprints were presented as recent evidence, Your Honor. Whether they were old? They were, Eli said, his voice slicing clean through the hesitation. You also mentioned I fled when officers arrived. Eli continued. Amelia straightened quickly, eager to recover. Correct. Witnesses and officers confirm. You ran from the scene? Eli's expression stayed neutral. Not exactly. I wasn't running from the garage. I was running from a squad car that nearly clipped me while I crossed the street. Panic isn't proof of guilt. He opened his folder again, pulling out a still frame from body cam footage. Here's Officer Daniel's recording. When I was detained, I wasn't carrying stolen property. I was carrying this. He held up a receipt stapled to a small grocery bag. Snacks from a corner store 3 blocks away. Time-stamped minutes before the alleged burglary. The gallery gasped louder this time, Judge. Keaton leaned forward now, no longer smirking. Ms. Vance, is there footage? Amelia swallowed. The body cam does exist, Your Honor, but you didn't present it, Eli finished for her. His voice controlled, unwavering. The shift in the courtroom was palpable. The laughter was gone. The whispers carried a different weight now. A boy who had walked in looking like an easy conviction was dismantling the prosecution's case piece by piece, not with anger but with surgical precision. Judge Keaton adjusted his glasses, trying to regain control of the room. But for the first time in years, the courtroom wasn't laughing with him. They were listening to Eli. The silence in the courtroom was different now. No longer the silence of boredom, but of unease, the kind that comes when the ground begins to shift beneath your feet. Judge Keaton tugged at his robe collar. His smirk was gone, replaced with something closer to irritation. Mr. Mercer, he said slowly, do you intend to turn this courtroom into a circus? Eli didn't flinch. His voice was calm, almost casual. No, Your Honor. I intend to turn it into a courtroom again. The gallery stirred. For the first time, the teenager's words carried more weight than the judge's. Amelia Vance cleared her throat, regaining her composure. Your Honor, regardless of the bicycle or the body cam, we have the testimony of Officer Hernandez. He personally witnessed the defendant exiting the garage. Keaton leaned forward, relieved. Finally some clarity. But Eli tilted his head, a faint smirk ghosting across his lips. That's interesting. Because according to the police report, Officer Hernandez arrived after the call was dispatched. He wasn't even on scene when the supposed burglary took place. Amelia froze. Eli flipped to a page in his folder. Reading aloud arrival recorded at 9:17 p.m. Dispatched at 9:10, he raised his eyes. Mr. Pierce called the police at 9:06, which means Hernandez arrived more than 10 minutes after. I'd already been arrested. So unless he's discovered time travel, he couldn't have seen me in that garage. Gasps erupted across the courtroom. Amelia's face drained of color. Judge Keaton's frown deepened. Counselor, is this accurate? Amelia stammered, flipping papers with trembling hands. The report, it appears... Eli let her flounder. He didn't need to press. The damage was done. He turned to the jury, his voice firm but controlled. Let's think about what really happened here. A burglary was reported. Police arrived. They found me a teenager a block away, walking home with snacks, and decided that was close enough. No stolen items on me. No one saw me inside. The fingerprints? Months old. The officer's testimony? Impossible. The prosecution has tried to build a case out of assumptions. He took a slow step closer to the jury box, locking eyes with each juror. But assumptions aren't evidence, and assumptions shouldn't decide someone's future. The gallery murmured, some nodding. Amelia's polished composure had crumbled. She gripped the edge of her table, like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. And one more thing, Eli said, sliding a final paper from his folder. This is a written statement from Leonard Pierce, the homeowner himself. Strangely, it wasn't included in the prosecution's evidence packet. He held it up, voice steady. I heard a noise in the garage, went outside, and saw someone running. But it wasn't Eli. The figure I saw was taller, wearing a dark jacket. Eli is shorter and was wearing a light hoodie that night. He placed the paper down with finality. That's the homeowner himself saying I wasn't the intruder. The prosecution chose to leave that out. Why? The room erupted in whispers. Judge Keaton slammed his gavel. Order in the court! But even he couldn't quiet the doubt spreading. Like wildfire, Eli turned back to the bench, his tone sharper now. Your Honor, the state's case relies on evidence that doesn't hold, testimony that doesn't fit, and omissions that reek of bias. If this court values truth, there is no choice but to dismiss these charges. Keaton's jaw tightened. He had mocked this boy from the start, written him off as a lost cause. But now he felt the sting of realization creeping in. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a fluke. Eli Mercer knew exactly what he was doing, and it terrified him. The gallery had gone. Quiet again. Every eye was on Eli. Every breath waited for the judge's response. But Eli wasn't finished. He took a deep breath, his voice steady but carrying an edge of steel. There's one more truth you should know, Your Honor. I'm not just some teenager winging it in court. For the last 6 years, I've studied law. Every night. Every weekend. My mother was a paralegal. I grew up on case files and transcripts. While other kids memorized game stats, I memorized precedents. By the time I was 16, I was coaching mock trial teams and beating first-year law students in debates. He let that sink in. I may be 18, but I know this system better than most who practice in it. And today was proof of that. The room froze. Judge Keaton blinked, speechless for the first time in years. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Keaton cleared his throat. His voice carried none of the earlier mockery, only gravity. Charges against Eli Mercer. Dismissed. The words detonated through the courtroom. Gasps, murmurs, even applause from a few in the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashing. Amelia Vance slumped into her chair, her case collapsing around her like dust. Eli remained still, calm. The faintest smile touched his lips, not of triumph, but of quiet validation. As the courtroom emptied, Judge Keaton lingered on the bench, staring at the boy who had turned his world upside down. Mr. Mercer, he called, just as Eli reached the door. Eli paused. Keaton's voice softened. You should consider law school. Eli turned his head just slightly, his expression unreadable. I already have, Your Honor. Then he walked out, leaving silence behind him. The steps of the courthouse buzzed with reporters. Microphones shoved forward, questions flying. Eli, did you know you'd win the case? What's next for you? Are you planning to become an attorney? Eli ignored them all. He wasn't here for spectacle. He pulled his hoodie tighter and stepped through the crowd until he saw her. His mother stood at the bottom of the steps, arms folded, eyes glistening with relief. She shook her head. You scared me half to death. Eli chuckled softly. Had to take the risk, Ma. She pulled him into a hug, whispering, You've got a gift. Eli, don't waste it. For the first time that day, Eli's composure cracked into a genuine smile. Across the street, Judge Keaton watched from the courthouse door. Gone was the arrogance, replaced by something else, recognition. He had thought this case would be just another conviction. Another teenager tossed aside by a system that rarely asked questions. But Eli Mercer had forced the system to look at itself, and for once, it blinked. How many other cases had been decided on assumption, not truth? How many voices had gone unheard simply because they didn't know how to fight back? Eli wasn't just defending himself. He was exposing something far bigger. And deep down, everyone watching knew this was only the beginning. Because the next time Eli Mercer stood in a courtroom, he wouldn't be the defendant. He'd be the attorney.